everybody. How are you? Well, I'm back, and this is my friend, the BFG. Hi! And I'm going to continue reading his story. So he's going to just sit down here next to me. You can't see him, but he's here listening. And before I read today's chapter, I want to review the story. The first chapter was called The Witching Hour. And while the moon was shining on Sophie's pillow, she couldn't believe how quiet and silent it was everywhere. And then suddenly there was something very big. And if you remember, she went and looked out the window and saw something very big and very dark, didn't she? Yes. And then chapter 2 was called Who? Who was it that she was seeing? The giant was 4 times bigger than a human. He carried a thin trumpet and a suitcase. He blew something into the Gucci kid's window. Oh no, the giant spotted Sophie watching him, and she was scared, wasn't she? And in the last chapter that we read, it was called The Snatch. Sophie was snatched up by the giant in her blanket. He started running with her, and she peeked out and feared that he would eat her when he got home. So you can see Sophie, she's peeking out right there. Yes. So tonight, this chapter is called The Cave. And we're going to see what happens to the BFG in the cave. The giant ran on and on, but now a curious change took place in his way of running. He seemed suddenly to go into higher gear. Faster and faster he went, and he was traveling at such a speed that the landscape just became blurred. The wind stung Sophie's cheeks. It made her eyes water. It whipped her head back and whistled in her ears. She could no longer feel the giant's feet touching the ground. She had a weird sensation they were flying. It was impossible to tell whether they were over land or sea. This giant had some sort of magic in his legs. The wind rushing against Sophie's face became so strong she had to duck down into the blanket to prevent her head from being blown away. Was it really possible they were crossing oceans? It felt that way to Sophie. She crouched in the blanket and listened to the howling of the wind. It went on for what seemed like hours. Then all at once, the wind stopped its howling. The pace began to slow down. Sophie could feel the giant's feet pounding against the earth again. She poked her head up out of the blanket for just a peek. They were in a country of thick forest and rushing rivers. The giant had definitely slowed down and was now running more normally. Although normal was a silly word to use for a galloping giant. He leaped over a dozen rivers. He went rattling through a giant forest, then down into a valley and up over a range of hills. And soon he was galloping over a desolate wasteland that was not quite of this earth. The ground was flat and pale and yellow, and great lumps of blue rock were scattered around, and dead trees stood everywhere like skeletons. The moon had disappeared, and now the dawn was breaking. Sophie, still peering out from the blanket, saw suddenly ahead of her a great mountain. The mountain was dark blue, and all around it the sky was gushing and glistening with lights. Bits of pale gold were flying among delicate, frosty white flakes of cloud. And over to one side, the rim of the morning sun was coming up red as blood. Right beneath the mountain, the giant stopped. He was puffing mightily. His great chest was heaving in and out, and he paused to catch his breath. Directly in front of them, lying against the side of the mountain, Sophie could see a massive round stone. It was as big as a house. The giant reached out and rolled the stone to one side as easily as if it had been a football. And now where the stone had been, there appeared a vast black hole. The hole was so large the giant didn't even have to duck his head to get in. He strode into the black hole, still carrying Sophie in one hand, the trumpet in the suitcase in the other. As soon as he was inside, he stopped and turned and rolled the great stone back into place so the entrance to his cave was completely hidden. Now that the entrance had been sealed up, there was not a glint of light inside the cave. All was black. Sophie felt herself being lowered to the ground. Then the giant let go of the blanket completely. His footsteps moved away. Sophie sat there in the dark, just shivering with fear. He's getting ready to eat me, she told herself. He will probably eat me raw, just as I am. Or perhaps he'll boil me first. Or maybe he'll have me fried. He'll drop me like a rasher of bacon into some gigantic frying pan, sizzling with fat. A blaze of light suddenly lit up the whole place. Sophie blinked and she stared. She saw an enormous cavern with a high rocky roof. The walls on either side were lined with shelves, and on the shelves there were row upon row of glass jars everywhere. In the middle of the floor there was a table 12 feet high and a chair to match. The giant took off his black coat and he hung it against the wall. Sophie saw that under the cloak he was wearing a sort of collarless shirt and a dirty old leather waistcoat that didn't seem to have any buttons. His trousers were faded green and were far too short in the legs. On his bare feet he was wearing a pair of ridiculous sandals that for some reason had holes cut along each side, with a large hole at the end where his toes stuck out. Sophie, crouching on the floor of the cave in her nightie, gazed back at him through thick steel-rimmed glasses. She was trembling like a leaf in the wind, and a finger of ice was running up and down the length of her spine. "Ha!" shouted the giant, walking forward and rubbing his hands together. "What has us got here?" His booming voice rolled around the walls of the cave like a burst of thunder. And I'm going to stop there and I'm going to show you my drawing of the cave. Sophie couldn't believe how fast the giant was running. It seemed as if they were flying, and when they slowed down there was a big mountain in front of them. The giant rolled the stone away and Sophie was dropped inside and the stone put back in place. There she is, and can you see all the jars on all the shelves? So many of them. So that's inside the cave. Our next story is called Yo. Yes? I like this story. Yo. Yes? It's about two little boys. Yo. Yes? Hey. Who? You talking to me? You. Me? Yes, you. Oh. What's up? Not much. Why? No fun. Oh? No friends. Oh? Yes. Look. Me. You? Yes, me. You. Well. I can't turn the page. There I go. Yes. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. Yo. Yes. And they look like they became great friends, didn't they? Going off to have so much fun. Yo. Oh, it's so nice to have a good friend, isn't it? And when you have a good friend, you like to giggle a lot with them. And this book is an old one from when my kids were young. You can tell it's old because it only cost 39 cents. It's called Giggles and Goggles. And look at that silly picture. Giggles and Goggles. Hey, how do you like my new Giggles? You mean goggles. No, that's what someone does for a sore throat. She goggles with mouthwash. You mean gargles. She's kind of silly, isn't she? No, that's what water does in the sink. It gargles down the drain. No, you mean gurgles. Gurgle, 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 gurgle. No, gurgles are what we wear to look thinner. Oh, you mean girdles. No, girdles are things you cook on. Here, have some girdle cakes. No, you mean griddle. Look at the doggy. He's going, yum. Griddle. No, that's something you use to make music. I play the griddle very well, don't you think? Oh, you mean fiddle. She's silly. No, a fiddle is a tricky, funny question like, what is yellow and black and goes zub, 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 zub? This book is full of fiddles. No, you mean riddles. Did you know what is yellow and black and goes zub, 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 zub? A bee flying backwards. No, those are little waves a dog makes when he jumps in a puddle. My dog is making a lot of riddles. No, silly, you mean ripples. No, that's what a worm does. It ripples around in your hand. Do you want to hold him? You mean wriggles. Oh. No, that's when you act silly and can't stop laughing. You have the wriggles. Oh, you mean giggles. Well, that's what I said. How do you like my new giggles? Oh, I forget. And here's all the words that we talked about. Giggles, goggles, gargles, gurgles, girdles, griddle, fiddle, riddles, ripples, wriggles, and back to giggles. And here's some pictures of all of them. Isn't that a funny book? Funny, funny. Let me show you that one more time, a picture of all the words. See that? This is goggles, gargles, gurgles, fiddle, griddle, girdles, riddles, ripples, wriggles, and giggles. Well, good night, everyone. I love you. And the BFG is going to throw you a kiss tonight. He's really a nice giant. His name actually means big, friendly giant. So he's really a nice guy. Look at his green pants, his toes sticking out of his shoes. He probably had a hard time finding shoes that fit his feet. His clothes weren't the nicest. Look at those big ears. Oh my goodness, we're going to hear more about all of the things about him soon. And he really is a very nice guy, right? Well, good night. I love you. Night. There's a little one. Did you catch it? I hope so.
Amen.